So right now, according to Dark Sky, it's currently 11 degrees with a real feel of -4. It actually was cold this morning, but I couldn't walk outside that early. So now it's like -12 in Celsius and -20. So if you're wondering, today is very cold. As you can see, it actually wasn't very cold yesterday. We're gonna analyze it because yesterday actually got to a high of about 42 degrees Fahrenheit, and the winds were calm. Well, not calm, but not like aggressively violent. Still a real feel that was barely above freezing. So what happened? Because it was a warm night too, low of like 38 degrees at night in the morning when it's normally much colder. Well, a silent cold front moved through, so by 2 o'clock it dropped to 40, and then 37 by 4 p.m. But by 6 o'clock it did hit the freezing mark. And because the winds began to slowly pick up, Dark Sky is a little bit inaccurate with the winds too. I saw something saying it was like 34 degrees, and with a real feel of like 20, and then it was 32 degrees with a real feel of 19. Because essentially the wind speeds were so aggressive that it could be above freezing, but feel like it was really below freezing. By 8 o'clock, it would drop to 28 degrees. By 10 o'clock, it would drop to 23 degrees. So essentially, it's kind of like it wasn't totally frigid, but with those wind just picking up in velocity, the dew point was like above freezing for parts of the day, and then it just plummets as the humidity goes down. And then you go into today, where it was 20 degrees at midnight, 17 at 2 a.m., 15 at 4 a.m., 12 at 6 a.m., and then it got down all the way to 10 degrees. And with those winds fast, the real feel actually got into the negatives. As to the dew point will rise back into the positives this morning because, well, Sunday is going to also get very cold in the morning. Throughout the day, it's gradually going to reverse itself, hitting the freezing mark at approximately 3 p.m. into a rain event, Winter Storm Izzy, but it's going to come down as rain here, where according to Dark Sky, the high could potentially go up to 50 degrees, and some of the other sources are saying that the mid to upper 40s is certainly within the question, if not 50. But now we are actually going to see what it's like to actually go inside in said conditions. I'm wearing. I would not recommend doing this if you don't have 4 layers, 2 hoods, just stuff like that. And I don't really have a face covering, but that's fine. You don't really feel the winds as much, and well, for the face covering, that really only matters with air temperature. The problem with last night was that not only was it very windy, but the gusts were tropical storm force. The winds have died down just a teeny tiny bit. Essentially, it's just because of the fact that the winds tend to die down when it gets colder. It relies on that. So, for example, when it hits the 40s, like all those times in October, the wind chill effect will only subtract about a degree or 2, mainly because the wind will pick up later on in the day when it's still hitting the 60s. And, that's going to happen, where, unless you have a day with like a high of about 60 or so, and even then the winds wouldn't be too extreme, assuming the low isn't. So the wind chill effects, and they really don't start until it gets to 50 degrees anyway, no matter what the wind is. Though you might feel a chilling effect, but it isn't an official wind chill in the same way, because people of larger sizes wouldn't actually feel the chill, which wind chill is somewhat dependent on, and the wind chill for you might actually be a lot lower because they're assuming that you're like a certain size and a certain weight. Wind chill affects smaller people a lot more. Oh God, this is frigid. This is a mistake. So essentially, and then in November something happens. You begin to go into days where instead of instead of where you're having it with the highs in the 60s and the lows in the 40s, it gets lower until eventually you have days with, highs in the 50s and lows in the 30s. So then you're going to have so even though the winds at night will still be calmer, because you're farther away from 50 degrees, the effects of a wind chill will be more. Category 5 hurricane force winds in 50 degrees, and you still will not have a RealFeel below freezing. At Category 5 hurricane intensity. But once you get to about 45, you absolutely will. That is fact. And as you have it going to the 50s and into the 30s, again, winds might be totally calm, but that, doesn't outweigh the, that fact of stuff. And last November was a roller coaster because it started out with, I think, a low of like 40, 42 or something, and a high of 60, which we had previously actually seen something like that in October. But then from there, you had days where you had highs that got as low as 53 degrees, with lows getting as low as 33 degrees. From there, was actually a lot colder than what they expected, and it nearly got to freezing. It frosted over on November 4th, 5th, and 6th. It's like right now at the point where, it's like too cold to frost. Frost will mainly see in the fall and then in the spring. Meanwhile, in, November, it then warmed up slightly in the next week. And then, so November 11th was pretty warm. And then the 12th, storm came over us, where you had a low of like 40, but it was at night. So like during the day, the low was like 59. The high was like 65, and it was raining. And essentially, you could kind of feel the warm air, even though you could feel cold humidity. It was actually the last day of our school. More than half people were wearing shorts, at least for the male population, and it was because of this, of this weird effect. And then the next day, the highs got 62 as well, even though the lows got lower. But the low temperature that night was about 40 degrees as well, and it was because of a direct cold front, which we saw on October 16th, but we haven't really seen since, where we had a direct cold front. So as such, the next day, the highs failed to even meet 50 degrees, but the winds were kind of calm. That's the thing, is that when you have these days with highs in the upper 40s in the winter, it's most likely windy. But the day where it hit 49 degrees was actually only 2 days ago. It's crazy. There was barely any wind too. So it actually felt like an October morning. But that kind of quickly evaporated because the beginning of the week was cold too. Sunday hit a high of about 41 to 42 degrees, so near average. And then it sank down to 36 on Sunday when Monday picked up. It was about 30 in the morning, but with very fast winds to make it feel like 18 degrees. And from there, the temperature plummeted down to 25 Monday night, where Tuesday picked it up with it getting down to 16. But unlike the last Tuesday, where January 4th, where it actually picked it up and got it above freezing at the end, this Tuesday failed to have it get to anything really above like 20 or 21, with continuously fast winds. Wednesday, however, marked a change. It got warmer than expected. It got all the way up to, I think, like 40. It had a low of 16, but you had a high like 42, 41 degrees. It was warm. Thursday, the heat really outperformed. I was also considering a low of like 25, 27 in that kind of region. So the fact that you had a high of like 48, 49, which is 9 degrees Celsius either way, is pretty impressive. And then Friday, even then, had a high of still 42 degrees. I think maybe it was only 41. I think it was 42 though. And then all of that just sank away when a silent cold front, and I don't even know which one, passed over us. It's going to be, the high today is only going to be about 21. Tomorrow's going to get back down to about 12. But the high tomorrow will be 41. That will be at 11:59 p.m. However, as it's going to be continuously warming throughout the day into an extreme temperature difference, with a temperature difference of 29 degrees if the projections are correct, where by Monday we might see a 50-degree day, or even better, a 51-degree day. That'll be so beneficial because if it was 50 degrees, the winds will be 30 miles an hour, which will be fast enough to make the RealFeel drop down to 40. But if it gets to 51, such a wind chill will be impossible, and for once it will actually feel like the 50s during winter, which is pretty monumental, I'm not going to lie. Because the ground will be frozen over, flash flooding could be a concern, but assuming that it tracks interior, we will not be receiving snow, which is good.